Okay. First and foremost, wow. But second of all, I apologize if my voice is a bit shaky throughout this. I actually very much cried watching that last bit, so I'm still recovering. I'm watching some of the later credits go. Wow. Wow, I'm really glad I played that game. This might be one of my favorite pieces of media of all time. Like, and granted, recency bias, because I did just finish it, but, and of course, you all know I critique things based on not only the emotional enjoyment of playing it, but also the merits of thinking on it and discussing it. However, the only piece of media I can think of that I enjoyed equally as much as this, not even more so, is Old Boy, which is my favorite movie, as everybody knows. Wow. It was really good, guys. And I can comfortably say that it's comparable to my other favorite media, simply on the basis that I spent a long time playing it. I mean, granted, if you look at my save file, it's only 40 minutes, but I know, like, I took a long time to play it. I didn't, like, rush the game, because I wanted to give this game some thought. So anytime I came up to... There was one time where I stopped playing for a bit, just because, like, I couldn't figure out how to proceed. I did not realize that I forgot to trade up from all the basic weaponry and armor. But outside of that one gameplay hill that I had, the only times I took pause was when the story became especially emotionally difficult. Now, at the end, it was just an onslaught of things, and I truly think if I wasn't aware of how close I was to the ending, I probably would have taken 2 or 3 big breaks at the end as well, because I think that such an intelligently written game deserves thought. I think a lot went into this. A lot goes into all media creation, don't get me wrong, but I think there was of course love and passion, and then there was talent and skill and foresight that went into this. Now, I haven't done a lot of the side content. I've killed a few of the espers. I've explored around. I've reached all of the endgame areas. Actually reached a lot of the endgame areas before I should have. Now I'll briefly touch on gameplay, because I don't think the gameplay, I like it, but it's actually kind of a ridiculously easy game, for me at least, because I play strategy video games. That's pretty much the only games I consistently play or have played since I was very young, and this is a strategy game. If you program your AI properly and you invest your license points well in the beginning, then you can pretty much make it to endgame without even really needing to upgrade your armor or swords or anything, and that's why I got as far as I did without doing that. It was just when I got to the tower, the Reed Arena Cataract, that I had some difficulty. But I did find it enjoyable. I like to sort of play with the gambits and the like, but ultimately this is a game that rests on... Oh, I'm watching the credits, and the concept art of Sid and Baby Balthier just showed up. Oh, God. And you really... I mean, I'll get to it, right? Like, I was already very impressed by this game without knowing when it came out or anything. I don't have a deep history with Final Fantasy. I've played 7 before this when I was very young, maybe 10. 10 years old or so. And I play 14, like, at present, which most of you probably know, because that's what you probably follow me for. But that being said, I'm not familiar with a lot of the mainline Final Fantasy. What is it? 6, 9, those are, the big ones. And I do plan on backtracking and playing through every Final Fantasy eventually, just because I want to get back into games. And I'm really glad I started with 12. I'm also very scared because of it, because I'm probably going to have the highest expectations of every other game now. So even if the gameplay was a bit lacking, I think it's such a good story that it makes up for it. And it was a gameplay style that kind of engaged me, because even, like, when my gambits, like, when I had set up my AI for all of the characters really well, I was like, oh, this is kind of easy. This is kind of boring. So I would make it more challenging for myself by, like, not letting myself use items and stuff. But those are little self-imposed challenges. I don't know. That's emergent gameplay, right? And it's a good game. It's just I think there's a joy to a game where you just like to explore. Like, in the beginning, you start out in Rabanastre, and you're walking around Rabanastre, and that's just so much fun, just talking to people. You learn so much. The city has a character. The people have a character. Even the difference between uptown and downtown. Like, the difference between how the people talk in the slums versus the markets. Even that is, like, worlds apart. And it's just that attention to detail. You go to Bujerba or Arcades, and the people's, like their lexicon, it's completely different. And I'm sure it's the same in the Japanese. This is the meticulous sort of translation stuff that went on. But I'm sure it's just as good as in Japanese. Now, this time I did listen to English voices. I usually listen to Japanese ones. I will probably New Game Plus with the Japanese voices on. So any voice acting discussion will be with regards to the English voice acting. Vane, phenomenal. Balthier and Fran, of course, phenomenal. Very, very well known. The three best performances. I would say Gabrant's voice was very good too. And I quite liked Lars's performance. I think Ash, Pinello, and Vaughn were a bit lacking though. Which I understand why people have difficulty empathizing with their characters when the English voice acting is lacking like that. Like, there were definitely some scenes that demanded a bit more from the voice actors than they gave. And of course, I will get my major gripe out of the way before I start. The colorism in this game is egregious. It is atrocious. I would not say the Rabanastarians, like, or the Dalmaskins or whatever, I would not say they're white-coated per se, but because most of them have fairly dark skin even then. But that being said, a lot of them are blonde with, like, light eyes, and then the Arcadians have distinctly darker skin tones, and they have dark hair. So I very much dislike that the Imperialist Empire has the more, for lack of a better term, person of color aesthetics, whereas the Dalmaskins are a little less so. And I think that just is Square Enix's colorism coming out, because Ash is very much that trope in Square Enix games of, like, pure pale girl. And she's not pale, but, like, relative to the rest of the cast. There aren't any really pale characters in this game, if we're talking actually, except maybe Larsa. But it's unfortunate because he's, like, the one chill guy in the Empire. No, that gripe aside, and the sort of exoticism surrounding the Viera. I really like the Viera in this game. I like them a lot more than I liked them in 14, and I've complained about this plenty in the past. The Viera are very cool. The individual cultures that exist within this game, they're also so rich. They're so thought out. You can go up to different characters, like, just, like, little NPCs and stuff, and they dispense their opinion, and that informs their culture, but also it informs how there's different individuals in the culture. Like, when you go to the Viera village, some of them are far kinder to the Hume child than others are, and I think that's really interesting. And you see a lot of, granted they're represented with beastmen, but you see a lot of cultures in this game represented that you don't usually, and I'm not saying from a perspective of, oh, this is good representation, but rather from a perspective that this is a fantasy story that scarcely draws upon European aesthetics for its fantasy. And it doesn't draw on East Asian aesthetics either. And I cannot think of any games that aren't indie. Like, I can't think, I'm sure there are games like this, like I'm sure Prince of Persia, maybe, but I can't think of a lot of games that do that, especially Japanese games. So it's very refreshing to see a fantasy that doesn't draw on European aesthetics at all, except from the sort of, Arcades is vaguely Iran, and Iran shares some aesthetics with old European aesthetics. Like, it's vaguely Arabian, but it's very good. I like each of the regions, they have accents. Their sentences are structured different. Like, it feels really, like, lived in. I love it. There's so much like foreshadowing, and I can't get into all of the specifics of the story because obviously these are raw thoughts. These are very emotional thoughts, and I am going to focus on the end game because that's what I did most recently. But oh my god, like the characters, they're just so fantastically written. I can only hope one day I will create something maybe like an eighth as good as this game. This game is so good, even with the incredibly limited animations from 2006. The characters just have so much of an emotional heart. It's incredible. And all of the character relationships are like, you know, it's these emergent relationships from this like 6-man ragtag group, and you really feel them get closer to each other. And like, you know, like their dialogue is not interchangeable. A Fran and Balthier interaction cannot be replaced with a Vaughn and Balthier interaction, even though both are marked by sass. You know, you get to see like all these different sides of them. Like, you know, with Balthier and Pinello, you get this, like, really emotional heart where, like, he acts more sensitive around her because she's a young girl. She's only 17, right? And then you get the same with Fran and Pinello. And then, you know, they both, like you know, Vaughn kind of, like, looks up to everyone. It's just, you know, it's just so much. It's so much. Like, I'm just vocally key smashing. Obviously, Vaughn and Pinello are the perspective characters. They are the audience. So they don't end up being as rich as the other characters. But I think that's fine in service of what they're supposed to be. And they're kids. That's what it comes down to. Vaughn is what? 15, 16, maybe 17? I think he was 15 when everything went down. So he would be 17 during the game. But, you know, they're all in that vein, like 15 to 18. And then, like, Balthier, Fran, Bosch, they're, like, older. Larsa is one of the best written children in fiction, if not the best written child. Oh my god. It is so refreshing to see a 12-year-old who's not like, ooh, but also not like way too intelligent for like a 12-year-old's age. Like he was very reasonably written. All of the characters have these complex motivations. I like that. And, like, huge spoilers going ahead. Minor spoilers for, I guess, 14 as well, just in case. I don't know if they're going to be up ahead, but obviously spoilers for 12. I'm glad Gabranth died. Like, Noah Gabranth, I'm glad he died. I was kind of, like, if they let him live, they let him live, right? And I would be like, eh. But, like, real, like, props to them for having him die. Like, he deserved it. I really do think so. And I don't think it was death as redemption, because this game is far more nuanced than that, but much more. There is purpose and thought behind everything someone does. It's very much a nobody sees themselves as the villain type game. The stuff with, I would say, like Vane's transformation at the end it's a bit strange. And they should have kept him hot. That was my big thing. They should have kept him hot. But I don't think it was bad writing. It was strange, yes, but if anything, it just communicated to me the futility of man and sort of the impotence of man. Payback for his hubris, right? I thought it was very poetic. It could have been, the visuals could have been a bit more poetic. And that's not just like, oh, he was hot. But like, you know, at the end he became this like beast made from, like, you know, strung together with mist by Venaz's will with parts of the Bahamut. Like, I think that's very compelling. And I think it's compelling that there's no resolution to the Venaz stuff. Because what's to say what the Okuria actually are? Like, in universe, obviously they're gods. But what do gods represent in fiction? More often than not, they represent the tides of fate and the world existing around us. And so, you know, trying to act like we can somehow overcome this mighty thing that is nature, I think that's a bit preposterous, and I think that's somewhat what's going on with the Okuria. Of course, again, I need time to think on it, but oh, it was just so spectacular. And I don't want to, like, go on about it, but, like, Balthier and Fran have me so soft. Oh my god. Like, if you want me to care about a straight ship, like, that's how you write them. Write them as people first, right? I care about their individual motivations, but it's not just them. Like, I care about every friendship within this group. I think there's so many, like, small details. Like, right before you go to do the final battle, obviously, Bosch is going to hold his brother, but Penelo, she stops and she, she comforts Larsa a little bit. Like, she checks in on him, and that shows, her, like, kind of caring nature. And it all just, like, comes together so well. Like, Penelo, I had respect as a white mage, and she, she, like, actually has the stats for it. And then, like, her turning out to be this just kind of caring person that, like, I don't know, that's a little diegetic, and I like that. But that's, my playthrough. But what can I speak to but my own playthrough of the game? Someone else might have Spectre as something else. But of the main cast, they were all great. Again, Ash was a bit lacking just because I think she was that Final Fantasy trope, and she was hampered by that, so to speak. I've seen that character before, done that way. And I haven't played a lot of Final Fantasy games, but obviously Final Fantasy games have influenced the larger cultural understanding of writing in Japanese media. So a lot of, like, that's why you get so many Sephiroths. And I mean, obviously Sephiroth is probably, like, influenced by Griffith, and we can go back and tie into this history of this. Like, media is incredibly masturbatory, and it feeds upon itself. But the fact of the matter is, there is no original idea, because ideas all come from the basis of human experience, blah, blah, blah. But that being said, I think it's because I've consumed later media that I'm just so familiar with that character that Ash is supposed to be, that perhaps I was a bit soured to a lot of the tropes surrounding her, and, it's the colorism. But I don't dislike Ash. I think for what she's worth, she's a very good character. For the tropes she represents, she is cream of the crop. Again, her voice acting very much hampers the tropes that she represents, and she does end up not being as nuanced as Fran or Balthier, who are by far the superior characters. Vayne and Cid, both fantastic. The villains in this game are really, like, solid. And I'm glad all of the major villains died. I think all of them deserved it. I think they all had these, like, interesting, nuanced motivations, and I definitely felt empathy for them. Like, I like that Vayne's thing is, like, he does want to, like, protect his brother, but he doesn't have this moment where he's like, when he dies, he doesn't have this moment where he's like, all I wanted to do was to make the world better for Larsa. Like, no, he never does anything like that. He doesn't act like like, we don't get this, like, when, like, Larsa, like, raises his sword to him. I was so scared we were gonna get something like that. But no, this was, like, he had these, like, really subdued reactions that of course he would have, because he was groomed for success and he wanted to succeed. There were so many, like, little, like, zinger lines. Like, oh my god. When he's talking about Cid being killed by Balthier, he said that happens a lot as of late, it seems. And it's like, oh, because he just killed his dad. That line, like, really hit me. There is a melancholy to Vayne that I am just entranced by. He's definitely a bad person, but his desires are not born of malice. Nobody's desires are born of malice here. And I find that compelling. Now, I saw shreds of this kind of writing in the most recent patch of Final Fantasy. 5.4 has this kind of nuanced political writing. But the story of 5.4, the nuanced political writing, it's a side piece of the larger story. And of course, it's the same thing in 12, right? Like, we get lots of little side stories that are like that. Like the interpersonal politics going on in Bajirba or whatever. Like, it's really magnificent, and I'd like to see more of it. Like, I would like to see more glimpses of that 12-like genius in 14, especially because if we go into either Garlemald or Charlene going forward, it is going to be a fundamentally political conflict. And there is emotional heart to 12. It is a very good game, both intellectually and emotionally. I think a lot of writing that's praised as good is just emotionally good. I don't need a story to be logical. A story doesn't need to be logical to be good. But if you can tie emotion and logic, then your writing will be phenomenal. I think a lot of times when people try to do that, they have logic inform emotion, which I don't think adheres to reality. I think it's a fantasy. And not an especially compelling one. It's a logical fantasy that logic would inform our emotions. But no, emotions inform our logic. That's how human beings function. And emotions inform the logic of Final Fantasy XII. And that makes this game feel so beautifully human. I cried twice just now. Once at the very end of it, just because it was that good, and once when Balthier, when Fran reaches up and strokes Balthier's face, of course. I definitely will be playing Tactics, because it takes place in this wonderful Ivalice setting. This game is alive. This game has a heart and soul, and I know that's a very cliched thing to say, but cliches, they come for a reason. Again, I spent about 40 hours playing it, and I dilly-dallied a lot. Like, I really meandered the game. You can probably beat it in 30. I could have shaved 10 hours off easy. I think it's a game everybody should play. I think a lot of the issues within 12 are very pertinent to our day-to-day in this, like, modern political sphere. And I think it's a game very much about empathy. And I think that's very, like, important. It's just so phenomenally important. I think it's such a beautiful game. And maybe these things are hard to take seriously because the game is somewhat abstracted. It takes place in this fantastical setting, but it will reach your heart. Whether you're somebody who revels in the dramatic or needs some sort of solid grounding, there will be a character for you in here. I think there's a character for everyone. Of course, the character I found the most relatable was Fran. I find her arc is about how she has to cope with, or not cope, come to grips with, I don't know, deal with the fact that she left her village. She left her culture, and she can't go back. And she comes with this, like, deep knowledge because her culture had that knowledge, and sort of how it pains her. The choice between the two sides of her identity. Like, she doesn't stop being, a Viera. She doesn't stop being, from this village, the A-Root village? Don't quote me. But she doesn't stop being her sister's sister because she left. And yet, that still is who she is. And I mean, I found the other characters compelling too. All of them had something going that I could relate to. Do not get me wrong. It's just Fran was especially the most relatable for me. I liked Gabrant a lot, like I said before. Vayne was great. Larsa was great. I'm naming off the characters I related to the most. So I found their personal arcs the most compelling. But the aesthetics are amazing. It's a beautiful game. I think even with the, 2006 graphics, I think strong design sense, strong visual directing really, made this game great. It's just, you gotta play it. It's a 10 out of 10, and maybe I'll give it a month and I'll replay it once, because I think no one can truly discern a work in one consumption, because when you're consuming it the first time, you're consuming it emotionally, and you can't think about it. The second time, you can pick up on the foreshadowing, and you won't get blindsided by the emotional heart of the game, whereas you can still appreciate it. Hence why I'm playing 14 a second time. So I will replay it, this time with Japanese VAs, so we'll see how much I can empathize with Penelo, Vaughn, and Ash with a different voice actor set. But I highly recommend it. Right now I'm saying it's a 10 out of 10. Again, recency bias, I'm definitely on a gameplay high. Please play it. These are my raw thoughts. I'll probably give some more cohesive thoughts later. I don't know if I'll do them in audio format. But yeah, thank you for listening, if you are. This is mostly for posterity, for future Noah to look back on and see how much he agrees when he does a second playthrough. But to anyone else who's listening, thank you for listening.